Cliff Richard was once Britain's most adored pop star, a beacon of wholesome charm, faith, and enduring musical talent. From the 1950s onward, his clean-cut image, angelic voice, and steadfast Christian beliefs made him a cultural icon, transcending generations and remaining relevant in an ever-changing industry. While many celebrities rode the wave of controversy and reinvention, Cliff remained unwavering, never married, never arrested, never publicly scandalous. Or so it seemed. Behind that unshakable smile and decades of pop hits was a man who carried heartbreak deeper and quieter than most could imagine. His life story, marked by forbidden love, bitter betrayal, and crushing injustice, is not about scandal but about the weight of silence, loyalty, and survival. At the heart of Cliff Richard's life was a woman, Jackie Irving. She wasn't just a passing fling or a youthful crush. Jackie was a dancer, an artist, and a figure of devotion in Cliff's life that spanned more than 50 years. Cliff loved her with a quiet, consistent intensity that never demanded attention. They never married. They never made headlines. But his feelings for her were unshakable. When Jackie married someone else, one of Cliff's own close friends, he said nothing. No jealousy, no protest, just continued friendship. And when that marriage ended, Jackie remarried. Still, Cliff remained close. When she grew ill, it was Cliff, her lifelong friend, perhaps her truest love, who stayed by her side until her final breath. The man who sang of love to millions lived a private reality of unrequited, restrained, enduring affection, a kind of love that is more tragic because it was never fully realized. The public never knew, or if they did, they didn't understand. Cliff never married. He never fathered children. Tabloids speculated endlessly about his sexuality. Was he gay? Was he hiding something? Why did this pop icon never settle down? The truth was more human and more heartbreaking. Cliff Richard, it seems, gave his heart away once and never asked for it back. But romantic heartbreak was not the only pain Cliff endured. In 2014, a nightmare unfolded in real time, and it wasn't scripted nor deserved. While Cliff was out of the country, police raided his home in Berkshire, investigating a decades-old sexual abuse allegation. The accusation came from a single anonymous source. Cliff hadn't even been questioned yet, but the BBC had already been tipped off, and in a shocking breach of ethics, coordinated with law enforcement to film the raid from a helicopter. As millions watched the live footage, Cliff Richard's pristine public image was shattered overnight. The trauma was immediate and deep. Cliff wasn't arrested. He wasn't even informed of the raid in advance. He had no opportunity to defend himself before the court of public opinion began its trial. For nearly 2 years, he lived under suspicion. His reputation smeared. He later described his home as contaminated not by evidence, but by the emotional toll of the intrusion. He developed health problems, shingles, insomnia, anxiety, and despite his decades of charity work, fame, and clean record, many turned their backs on him. When the investigation finally ended with no charges and no evidence, the apology was too little, too late. Cliff had already been publicly humiliated. Cliff sued the BBC and won. It was a landmark victory for privacy rights in the UK, but justice, even when served, couldn't undo the psychological damage. Cliff spoke of betrayal not just by the media, but by the system, a system that once hailed him as a national treasure, only to discard him at the first whiff of scandal. It was a moment that would have destroyed lesser men, but Cliff stood firm, dignified, resilient, and determined to reclaim his legacy. Throughout his career, Cliff Richard has remained under scrutiny. His bachelor status has been questioned, his friendships dissected, yet he's never lashed out, never written a tell-all, never tried to settle scores. He simply continued to sing, to perform, to release albums and bring joy to audiences who had stood by him. And though his inner circle remained small, his heart stayed open. His story is one of quiet endurance. While others exploded under pressure, Cliff held his center. When the music industry evolved into shock-driven antics and fame at any cost, theatrics, he stayed true to the values that made him a star in the first place. He didn't just entertain, he endured. Through loss, through loneliness, through lies. His was not the flashy resilience of a comeback king, it was the slow, often invisible survival of a man deeply misunderstood. Even now, in his 80s, Cliff continues to tour, to sing, and to reflect on a life that was never as easy as it looked. He has spoken of forgiveness, of the importance of faith, of how he clings to grace when the world turns cold. But behind those affirmations are the shadows that never quite left him. The heartbreak of Jackie Irving, the humiliation of false accusation, the questions that never stopped coming. Cliff Richard's life is a ballad in its truest form, full of high notes and haunting lows. A love story that never found its ending. A reputation both cherished and tarnished. A voice that never stopped singing, even when no one wanted to listen. And if you ask his fans, he's not just a pop icon, he's a symbol of enduring grace, of what it means to be strong, not through volume, but through dignity. He never needed the headlines. He just needed a mic, a stage, and a song. In a world that often equates vulnerability with weakness, Cliff Richard's legacy is something entirely different. He was vulnerable, yes, but never weak. He bent, but didn't break. He loved without demand. He suffered without rage. And he forgave without applause. That perhaps is why his story feels so rare. Because it's not about a fall from grace. It's about a lifetime of walking with grace through the deepest shadows. We may never fully know the depth of Cliff's losses, or the names of those who hurt him, or the full cost of his silence. But we do know this: Cliff Richard remains. Not because he fought the loudest, but because he endured the longest. Subscribe to Hollywood Untold for more emotional stories behind music legends and the feuds that shaped rock history. Tap the bell to never miss a beat.